Just days before my son's wedding, a stranger called, exposing my future daughter-in-law's devastating secret. She was already married, a calculating con artist. They planned to clean us out. While everyone celebrated, I had to smile. But when her carefully constructed world finally crumbled, my silence spoke volumes. I'm sharing my story so truth can reach far. Like, share, and tell us where you are listening from. The air in Eleanor Vance's elegant living room vibrated with joyful anticipation. In precisely 2 days, her only son Liam would marry Clara, the woman he adored. At 64, Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her chest that rivaled the gentle spring sunshine filtering through the windows. Every detail of the wedding was meticulously planned. The flowers, the catering, Clara's breathtaking ivory gown hanging in a guest room, ready for its grand debut. Eleanor had thrown herself into the preparations with boundless energy, seeing it not just as a wedding, but as the beginning of a beautiful new chapter for her beloved Liam. She'd always dreamed of seeing him settled, happy, and now, finally, it was happening. She pictured Liam's beaming face, the proud light in his eyes, and a contented bowing button escaped her lips. Suddenly, the shrill ring of her landline sliced through the quiet afternoon. Eleanor, startled, glanced at the caller ID. It was a hidden number, unknown. Usually she let such calls go to voicemail, but a strange, unbidden impulse made her reach for the receiver. "Hello?" she answered, a slight edge of curiosity in her voice. A hushed, urgent voice responded, a woman's, strained with emotion. "Is this Eleanor Vance?" The voice was unfamiliar, yet held an intensity that immediately put Eleanor on alert. "It is," Eleanor confirmed, her brow furrowing. "Who is this?" "Please listen carefully, Mrs. Vance. Don't go to the wedding. Your daughter-in-law, she's planned something terrible." The words were delivered in a rush, a torrent of dread pouring through the phone line. Eleanor's heart gave a violent lurch against her ribs. She gripped the phone tighter, her knuckles turning white. What kind of cruel prank was this? Just 2 days before the most important day of Liam's life. "Who is this? What are you talking about?" Eleanor demanded, her voice trembling, despite her effort to keep it steady. A chilling premonition settled over her, a cold tendril of fear snaking around her hopeful heart. "My name is Nora Reed," the woman replied, her voice now filled with a desperate plea. "And the woman Liam is marrying, Clara, she isn't who you think she is. Her real name is Evelyn Reed, and she's my deceased brother, Arthur Reed's wife. She's already married." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. The receiver pressed hard against her ear as the world around her seemed to tilt. "What? That's impossible," she whispered, her mind reeling. Clara, married to a deceased brother? It was a story too bizarre, too cruel to be true. Nora, however, continued, her voice gaining a desperate certainty. "It's true, I have to warn you. Evelyn has a pattern. She finds wealthy, often lonely men, isolates them from their families, and then slowly, systematically, cleans out their finances. The house, the business shares, bank accounts. She targets everything. Then she disappears, leaving them with nothing." Nora paused, taking a ragged breath. "She's been working on him for months, Mrs. Vance. Your son." A cold sweat broke out on Eleanor's skin. Suddenly, seemingly insignificant moments flashed through her mind, taking on a sinister new light. Liam's growing distance, his vague, superficial answers whenever Eleanor pressed him about Clara's background. "She's from out of state, Mom, not many family ties. Just wants a fresh start here with me." Eleanor had dismissed it as a young man in love, perhaps a little defensive of his chosen partner. Now it echoed with an ominous ring. Their conversations had become shorter, less intimate, often centered around wedding plans or superficial topics, avoiding any deeper connections she'd always shared with her son. She had attributed it to the overwhelming stress of wedding preparations, perhaps Clara's influence. But now she saw it as isolation, exactly as Nora described. "Bigamy is incredibly difficult to prove," Nora continued, her voice laced with bitterness, "especially when they're as cunning as Evelyn. My brother Arthur was her first known target. He died, and I suspected toward her but couldn't prove anything concrete. Then there was Thomas, another man, another life she ruined. Thomas died by suicide after Evelyn cleaned him out completely. He was left with absolutely nothing, not even his dignity." The weight of Nora's words pressed down on Eleanor, suffocating her. Suicide. The implications were horrifying. Liam, her precious son, was walking into a trap set by a predator. Nora's desperation was palpable, radiating through the phone line. "I want to save Liam, Mrs. Vance. He deserves better than to be another one of her victims." What can I do?" Eleanor stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Her mind raced, grappling with the enormity of the information. "Meet me," Nora urged. "Tomorrow morning, Riverside Park, by the old oak tree, 9 o'clock. Don't tell anyone, especially not Clara. She's incredibly perceptive, and she'll know if you suspect anything. She'll disappear, and Liam will be lost." The call ended abruptly, leaving Eleanor in a stunned silence, the dial tone buzzing in her ear like a phantom warning. Her hands trembled as she slowly replaced the receiver. She walked to the window, her gaze fixed on the meticulously kept garden, yet seeing nothing. Her carefully constructed world of joy and anticipation had shattered, replaced by a terrifying mosaic of doubt and fear. She replayed every interaction with Clara since Liam had first introduced them almost a year ago. Clara, with her luminous smile, her perfectly styled hair, her elegant clothes. She had been so charming, so poised, so flawless. Too flawless? Eleanor now wondered. Clara had offered few concrete details about her past, explaining it away with vague tales of a difficult family, a desire to leave old sorrows behind. Eleanor, blinded by Liam's happiness, had found it endearing, a sign of her strength. Now it felt like a cleverly constructed shield. Clara's stories of previous jobs, her past addresses, Eleanor realized with a jolt that she had never independently verified any of it. Liam had simply accepted them, and Eleanor had trusted Liam. A cold certainty began to settle in Eleanor's stomach. It was a horrifying possibility, a nightmare come to life. Her rational mind screamed for proof, for evidence to dismiss this monstrous accusation. But her mother's instinct, raw and primal, knew that something was deeply wrong. She had to know the truth. For Liam, for his future. She would meet Nora Reed, she had to. The morning of the day before the wedding dawned gray and overcast, mirroring the turmoil in Eleanor's heart. Despite the churning anxiety within her, she forced herself to maintain an outward facade of calm. She went through the motions of her morning routine, brewing coffee, watering her plants, even attempting to read the newspaper. But her mind was a whirlwind of fear and speculation. Every shadow seemed to hold a sinister secret, every distant sound a premonition. The memory of Nora Reed's urgent voice, her warnings of bigamy and financial ruin, played on an endless loop in Eleanor's head. She kept glancing at the clock, counting the minutes until her 9 o'clock meeting at Riverside Park. The suspense was almost unbearable. Just as she was about to leave, her phone rang. It was Liam. Her heart leaped, a flicker of hope that perhaps he would sense something was wrong, that he might confide in her. But his voice, though familiar, sounded strained, almost distant. "Mom, can you do me a huge favor?" he asked, a hint of something unsaid in his tone. "Of course, honey. What is it?" Eleanor replied, trying to keep her own voice light and unconcerned. "Clara's Aunt Rachel, she's in town for the wedding, and her dress is at the dry cleaner. It's a bit out of the way for us right now, and Clara is swamped with final details. Could you possibly pick it up for us?" Eleanor felt a chill creep up her spine. "Rachel," she repeated, the name echoing Nora's cryptic warning about Clara's true identity. Evelyn Reed, being married to Arthur Reed. Clara had never mentioned an aunt named Rachel. "Sure, honey. What's the name on the order?" "It'll be under Morrison," Liam said casually. "Rachel Morrison." Clara said it was easier that way. For convenience, since her Aunt Rachel is also named Evelyn. Just like Clara. "It gets confusing, you know." He chuckled, a sound that felt hollow and forced to Eleanor. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. Morrison, Rachel Morrison, the original name used in Nora's earlier story before Eleanor had been given the full name Evelyn Reed. A knot tightened in her stomach. Evelyn. It wasn't an aunt, it was Clara. Liam was lying, or had been expertly fed a lie himself. The smooth, practiced explanation about convenience was a stark red flag, confirming Nora's description of Clara's manipulative tendencies. Eleanor felt a profound sense of nausea. "Right," Eleanor managed, her voice carefully neutral. Morrison, Rachel Morrison. Got it. I'll pick it up on my way to the park. She felt a perverse sense of relief. At least now she had a concrete piece of information, a thread to pull. After her hurried, urgent meeting with Nora at Riverside Park, where Nora presented her with the damning evidence of Arthur Reed's tragic demise and Evelyn's cruel pattern of deceit, Eleanor found herself driving, not towards home, but towards the dry cleaner Liam had mentioned. Nora's tearful accounts and the faded photographs she'd shared of Arthur, a man Eleanor had never met but whose fate now deeply disturbed her, fueled Eleanor's resolve. At the dry cleaner, she retrieved the gown. The attendant, a cheerful young woman, handed her the receipt. Eleanor's eyes scanned it quickly. Rachel Morrison, Evelyn Reed, it clearly stated beneath the itemized list. The payment had been made months ago, long before any aunt would have arrived for a wedding. The truth, cold and undeniable, began to solidify. This wasn't an aunt's dress. It was Clara's, or rather, Evelyn Reed's. A new surge of determination coursed through Eleanor. Nora had urged her to find proof, something undeniable to present to Liam. This was her chance. She drove straight to Liam's house, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She used the spare key Liam had given her years ago, the one he'd probably forgotten about, a relic from a time when their bond was simple and uncomplicated. The house was quiet. A quick glance around revealed Clara's presence everywhere. Expensive, fashionable belongings that seemed to scream new money. Designer bags lay casually on an armchair, high-end cosmetics cluttered the bathroom counter, and a collection of designer shoes lined the hallway. Eleanor felt a grim satisfaction. This wasn't Liam's style. This was Evelyn Reed's footprint. Eleanor started in the master bedroom, then the study, searching frantically for anything that resembled official documents. Her hands trembled as she opened drawers, rummaged through closets, and peered into every nook and cranny. She knew she was invading Liam's privacy, but the stakes were too high. This wasn't about privacy. It was about protecting her son from a predator. Finally, in the guest bedroom, tucked away in the back of a rarely used dresser drawer beneath a stack of old linens, she found it, a thick manila folder. Her breath hitched. With trembling fingers, she pulled out the contents. The first document was a marriage certificate. The names, Evelyn Reed and Arthur Reed. The date, 3 years ago. Eleanor's eyes blurred. It was real. Nora had been telling the truth. Next, a series of bank statements showing large sums of money being systematically transferred from Arthur Reed's accounts to Evelyn Reed's over a period of months. Property deeds followed, all in Evelyn's name, acquired shortly after Arthur's marriage. Then a death certificate. Arthur Reed, cause of death, suicide by overdose, 8 months prior. The chilling detail, the timeline, it all matched Nora's account perfectly. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea, her stomach churning with a mixture of fear and profound anger. She continued to sift through the folder. More recent documents detailed Liam's finances. His house, refinanced, with Evelyn now listed as co-owner. His primary bank account, now a joint account with Evelyn. And then, the most horrifying discovery of all. Liam's life insurance policy, updated just weeks ago, naming Evelyn Reed as the sole beneficiary. Sole beneficiary. Liam's life was not just at risk financially, it was directly, terrifyingly in danger. Eleanor pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She photographed every single document, every piece of damning evidence, capturing the cold, calculated destruction Evelyn Reed had meticulously planned. The scope of it, the sheer audacity made her blood run cold. She had to save Liam. Just as she was about to put the folder back, she heard the front door open. A familiar, lilting voice called out, "Liam, honey, I'm home." Clara, Evelyn. Eleanor froze, the manila folder clutched in her hand. Her mind raced, searching for an alibi, a plausible explanation for her presence in the guest bedroom. She snatched up the dry, clean dress from the bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Clara appeared in the doorway, her smile unwavering, though her eyes held a flicker of surprise. "Eleanor, what a lovely surprise. I didn't expect you." Eleanor forced a smile, holding up the dress. "Oh, darling, I just picked up your auntie's dress from the dry cleaner. Liam mentioned it this morning, and I was just putting it in the guest room for her. Thought I'd save you the trip." Her voice to her own ears sounded unnaturally bright. Clara's smile tightened, a barely perceptible shift. "Oh, that's so sweet of you, Eleanor. Thank you. Aunt Rachel is just so shy. She's staying at a hotel downtown until the wedding. She prefers her privacy." Another smooth lie, delivered with effortless charm. Eleanor wanted to scream. As Clara turned to put her purse down on the kitchen counter, Eleanor's eyes darted to the surface. Her gaze fell upon a document, partially obscured by a decorative bowl. It was an insurance policy, a life insurance policy, and the name prominently displayed at the top was Liam Vance. Eleanor's blood ran cold for the second time that day. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Evelyn Reed wasn't just after Liam's money. She was after his life. The suicide of Arthur Reed, the mention of Thomas, it wasn't just bigamy. It was cold-blooded murder disguised as something else. "Liam is so lucky to have a mother who cares so much," Clara purred, turning back to Eleanor, her smile now wide and entirely disarming. The words, meant to be sweet, echoed in Eleanor's mind like a sinister prophecy. She felt a profound sense of dread, realizing the true, terrifying extent of the danger Liam was in. Eleanor arrived at Riverside Park well before 9 o'clock, her nerves stretched taut, a tight knot of dread in her stomach. The morning mist still clung to the branches of the old oak trees, creating an ethereal, almost eerie atmosphere. Each rustle of leaves, each distant bird call, sent a jolt of anxiety through her. She felt like a character in a spy novel, caught in a clandestine meeting. But this was her life, her son's life, hanging in the balance. She paced, her gaze fixed on the park entrance, every fiber of her being yearning for reassurance, for answers, for a way to stop the impending disaster. A few minutes before the hour, a woman approached, her gait purposeful, her eyes scanning the park with a wary intensity. She was younger than Eleanor had imagined Nora Reed would be, perhaps in her late 30s or early 40s, with dark, worried eyes that instantly conveyed the depth of her distress. "Eleanor Vance?" the woman asked, her voice hushed but firm, confirming her identity. "Yes," Eleanor responded, her own voice barely a whisper. "Nora." Nora nodded, a flicker of relief washing over her face. "Thank God you came. I wasn't sure you'd believe me." "I do now," Eleanor said, pulling out her phone. "Oh, I'm playing. I found these at Liam's house." She quickly showed Nora the photographs she had taken, the marriage certificate between Evelyn Reed and Arthur Reed, the bank statements, the property deeds, and Arthur's death certificate. Nora's eyes widened as she scrolled through the images, a grim satisfaction replacing some of her initial tension. "It's all there, just as I told you. You've done well, Mrs. Vance." She reached into her large canvas bag and pulled out a thick, legal-size envelope, stained and creased with age. "I've brought my own proof, everything I could gather about Evelyn's background and what she did to Arthur." Eleanor took the envelope, her fingers trembling. Inside, the first item was a faded photograph. It showed Evelyn Reed, Clara, smiling broadly, arm in arm with a man. He was handsome, with kind eyes and a familiar jawline. Eleanor's breath hitched. He looked eerily like Liam. The same build, the same dark hair, even a similar smile. Evelyn had a type, and Liam fit it perfectly. The realization sent a fresh wave of terror through Eleanor. This wasn't a random target, it was a calculated choice. "Arthur was the fourth," Nora said, her voice dropping to a somber tone. "At least the fourth I know of for sure. Before him, there were Edward Hayes, Robert Foster, and Daniel Lee. All died suspiciously within 2 years of marrying Evelyn. All wealthy, all isolated. All left nothing but debt and a grieving family. 4 men, 4 dead husbands," Eleanor murmured. The words tasting like ash in her mouth. The pattern was horrifying, sickening in its cold predictability. Clara wasn't just a con artist, she was a serial killer. Nora continued, her voice heavy with the weight of her shared burden. "She's meticulous. She moves from state to state, never staying Evelyn Reed long enough to connect the dots. The methods of death always vary. Suicide by overdose, a tragic car accident, even a boating mishap. Always an alibi, always plausible deniability. The police just saw grieving widows or unlucky men. Nobody ever pieced it together because she changed her name, her story, her location after each one. Eleanor flipped through Nora's documents. There were copies of old marriage licenses under different names, newspaper clippings of obituaries that listed different causes of death, all within short periods after Evelyn, under various aliases, had entered their lives. Bank statements showed systematic draining of accounts, property transfers weeks before the deaths, and, chillingly, life insurance policies making Evelyn the sole beneficiary for millions of dollars. The sums were staggering. She told Liam she was a teacher, Eleanor said, her voice laced with disgust. Nora scoffed. A teacher? Please. Evelyn is a pharmaceutical sales representative. A traveling one at that. It's the perfect cover. She's constantly on the road, meeting new doctors, has access to all sorts of prescription medications. It's how she orchestrated Arthur's suicide. A cold dread spread through Eleanor's chest. She remembered Liam's recent back injury, the powerful pain medication he had been prescribed a few months ago. He'd mentioned Clara being so helpful, reminding him when to take his doses. Liam was on back medication recently, Eleanor whispered, her mind racing. Nora's eyes met hers, filled with a grim understanding. Arthur was on similar meds for chronic pain. She helped him manage them. Eleanor felt a wave of dizziness. Liam was being poisoned, slowly, systematically, just like Arthur. The only legal loophole, and Nora explained, pointing to a faded document, is that her marriage to Arthur was never officially dissolved. He died, yes, but the marriage was still legally binding. So Liam's upcoming marriage to her would be null and void. Bigamy. Nora then presented recent public records she'd managed to unearth. Liam's house, ownership recently transferred to both Liam and Evelyn. His life insurance policy, beneficiaries changed to Evelyn. His retirement accounts, his business shares, all amended to include her or make her the primary beneficiary. She makes them feel like heroes, Nora explained, her voice tinged with bitterness. Creates a little emergency, a crisis she needs help with, and they jump to sign anything to save her or protect their future together. He probably thinks he's being so generous, so loving by putting her name on everything. The wedding is just the final step, the seal of legitimacy. She'll want to appear stable and loving before she makes her move, like she did with Arthur. Nora's words were a punch to the gut. I believe she plans to kill Liam soon after the wedding, just like Arthur, to collect on all those policies. Eleanor felt a scream building in her throat, but it lodged there, choked by terror. This wasn't just about money, it was about murder. And Liam, her son, was next. Then Nora reached into her bag again, pulling out a small digital recorder. I've been gathering evidence for months, trying to connect her to Arthur's death. I managed to record a conversation. It's not a full confession, but she talks about Arthur, about the Arthur solution, and the timeline for her future plans in a chilling way. She doesn't realize I was recording, or she thought I was just being a sympathetic ear. Nora pressed a button. A clipped, familiar voice, Clara's voice, filled the air. Eleanor closed her eyes, listening in horror as Evelyn Reed casually discussed dealing with problems, hinting at Arthur's demise as a clever solution. The casual cruelty in her tone, the veiled threats, the chilling implications of her future plans for a new beginning after the wedding made Eleanor's blood run cold. Evelyn even casually mentioned a specific timeline, eerily similar to when she had changed Liam's policies, suggesting a plan for her future. Eleanor took the recorder from Nora, her hands shaking. The weight of it felt immense, like the weight of Liam's life in her hands. She had the proof, the terrifying truth. The wedding had to be stopped, not just to save Liam's fortune, but to save his life. The night before Liam's wedding was a torment for Eleanor. Sleep was an impossible luxury. She lay awake, the digital recorder clutched in her hand, pressing play again and again, each repetition of Evelyn Reed's chilling voice deepening the icy dread in her soul. The Arthur solution worked perfectly. Quick, clean, no questions asked. But I learned my lesson about timing. 6 weeks was too soon. This time I'll wait at least 3 months, maybe 4. Give them a chance to grieve the loss of their new husband, then disappear with everything. The casual, almost cheerful tone with which Evelyn discussed her murderous scheme was the most horrifying part. 3 months, 4 months. That was all the time Liam had left. Eleanor envisioned her son, vibrant and full of life, slowly succumbing to some insidious poison, his mother powerless to stop it. The thought was unbearable. With the first hint of dawn, Eleanor made her decision. She couldn't wait. She wouldn't wait for Liam to walk down that aisle, to commit his life to a woman who planned to end it. She had to confront him immediately before the ceremony, before Evelyn had another chance to whisper her sweet poison into his ear, to tighten her manipulative grip. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she dressed, fumbling with buttons and zippers. She packed a small bag with all the evidence: the printouts of the marriage certificate, the bank statements, the death certificate, the public records of Liam's transferred assets, and most crucially, the digital recorder. Each item felt like a lead weight in her bag, a physical representation of the terrible burden she carried. The drive to Liam's house, usually a comforting journey, felt like a desperate race against time. The streets were quiet, adorned with the first festive decorations for the impending wedding, mockingly bright against the gray morning sky. Eleanor's mind was a frantic blur of strategies, pleas, and worst-case scenarios. How would Liam react? Would he believe her? Would he hate her for shattering his illusion of happiness? She pushed the doubts aside. His life depended on it. She pulled into Liam's driveway, her heart pounding. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, she walked up to the front door and pressed the doorbell, her finger trembling. The door opened almost immediately. Clara stood there, radiant in a shimmering silk robe, her hair perfectly coiffed, a picture of serene anticipation. Her smile was wide, welcoming, a beacon of bridal joy. "Eleanor, what a surprise. You're so early, darling. Liam's still getting ready." But Eleanor saw through it. The radiant smile, the welcoming tone. It was a practiced performance, a flawless mask over the cold, calculating killer Nora had described. Eleanor's gaze met Clara's, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a flicker of something guarded, a hint of suspicion behind the carefully constructed facade. "I need to speak to Liam," Eleanor stated, her voice firm, unwavering despite the tremor in her hands. "Privately." Clara's smile wavered, a barely perceptible shift. "Oh, darling, is everything all right? Liam is just finishing up. Perhaps you could tell me. I'm his fiancée, after all." Her eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of steel in their depths. "It's about Liam. It's urgent, and I need to speak to him alone," Eleanor insisted, stepping slightly forward, her resolve hardening. Clara hesitated, then, with a sigh that seemed more theatrical than genuinely put out, stepped aside. "Very well. Come in. I'll just go tell him you're here." Her tone was clipped, her hospitality now clearly forced. Eleanor stepped into the house, the familiar scent of fresh flowers and expensive perfume filling the air. Her eyes scanned the room, noting the wedding programs laid out on a table, the small gifts for the bridal party. It was a scene of perfect domestic bliss, ready for a celebration that would never happen. Moments later, Liam appeared from the hallway, dressed in his crisp white shirt, his suspenders hanging loose. His face was alight with anticipation, a wide, genuine smile on his lips. He looked so happy, so blissfully unaware of the precipice he stood on, that Eleanor's heart ached with a profound, almost debilitating sorrow. "Mom, what are you doing here so early?" he greeted her, striding forward to give her a hug. He noticed her distress immediately. "Mom, what's wrong? You look awful." He pulled back, his brow furrowed with a concern. "Is everything okay?" "No, Liam, it's not," Eleanor said, her voice strained. She glanced pointedly at Clara, who had reappeared in the doorway, a look of feigned concern on her face. "I need to speak to you, alone. Now." Liam looked from his mother to Clara, a hint of irritation crossing his face. "Mom, what is this? Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of Clara. We don't have secrets from each other." He placed a reassuring hand on Clara's arm, drawing her closer, a gesture that twisted a knife in Eleanor's already bleeding heart. "You really believe that, don't you?" Eleanor said, her voice shaking with emotion. She knew this was her only chance. She had to hit him with the truth, raw and unadorned. "Liam, Clara is already married. She has been for 3 years." The words hung in the air, a shocking pronouncement. Liam's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in anger. Clara, however, was a master of deception. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes welling up with tears, her perfect face crumbling into a picture of wounded innocence. "Eleanor, how could you say such a cruel, terrible thing? On our wedding day," she cried, her voice laced with feigned pain. Eleanor ignored her, her gaze fixed on Liam. She reached into her bag and pulled out the first document, placing it on the coffee table. "Her real name is Evelyn Reed, Liam, and she married Arthur Reed in Atlanta 3 years ago. This is their marriage certificate. They never divorced." Liam picked up the document, his hands shaking. He stared at it, at the picture of Evelyn, Clara, with Arthur. He looked at the names, the date, the official seal. The color drained from his face as he recognized the woman in the photograph, even with a slightly different hairstyle and less refined makeup. This is fake, Mom," he stammered, his voice filled with a desperate denial. "This has to be some kind of sick joke." "It's not a joke, Liam," Eleanor said, pulling out the next set of documents. "These are bank records, property transfers from Arthur Reed's accounts to Evelyn's. And this." She laid down the death certificate. "Arthur Reed died 8 months ago, Liam. Suicide by overdose, after she drained his accounts and took everything he owned." Liam's eyes scanned the documents, his face a mask of dawning horror. Clara stood frozen, her earlier tears now replaced by a chilling stillness. "And Arthur wasn't her first victim, Liam," Eleanor continued, her voice rising with righteous fury. "There were 3 others before him: Edward Hayes, Robert Foster, Daniel Lee. All wealthy, all isolated, all died suspiciously within 2 years of marrying her. She is a killer, Liam. She plans to do the same to you." "Stop it, Mom! Stop it right now!" Liam roared, throwing the papers back onto the table, his face contorted in a mixture of rage and terror. "How dare you? How could you believe such monstrous lies about Clara, about the woman I love?" "Because it's the truth, Liam," Eleanor shouted, tears streaming down her face now, not for her own pain, but for her son's blindness. She reached into her bag again, pulling out the digital recorder. "And I have proof. Listen to this." She pressed play. Evelyn Reed's voice, clear and cold, filled the room. "The Arthur solution worked perfectly. Quick, clean, no questions asked. But I learned my lesson about timing. 6 weeks was too soon. This time I'll wait at least 3 months, maybe 4. Give them a chance to grieve the loss of their new husband, then disappear with everything." The recording ended, plunging the room into a suffocating silence. Liam stood motionless, his eyes wide, fixed on the small device in his mother's hand. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving it pale and drawn. He looked from his mother to Clara, who now stood utterly still, her facade finally shattered, her eyes burning with a silent, murderous fury. The silence that followed the recording was suffocating, heavy with unspoken truths and dawning horror. If you're captivated by this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to follow along. You won't believe how this ends. Clara's face, once a picture of wounded innocence, underwent a terrifying transformation. The mask dropped entirely. Her eyes, moments ago filled with feigned tears, hardened into chips of ice. Her lips, which had been twisted in a mournful frown, now curved into a cold, contemptuous smirk. "You have no idea what you've done, Eleanor," she said, her voice flat, devoid of any warmth, any emotion whatsoever. It was the voice of a predator, stripped bare of all pretense. Liam's world crumbled around him. He stared at Clara, the woman he was hours away from marrying, his face etched with utter devastation. "Clara, what? What is this?" His voice was a raw, broken whisper, a desperate plea for her to deny it all, to explain it away. Evelyn, no longer Clara, laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that sent shivers down Eleanor's spine. "What is it, darling Liam? It's reality." She casually confirmed her past marriage to Arthur. "Yes, I was married to Arthur Reed. He's dead now, poor man. So technically, I'm a widow. There's no law against a widow remarrying, is there?" She shrugged, her eyes glinting with amusement at Liam's pain. "It just makes things a little more complicated, but solvable." "The money?" Liam stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the printouts scattered on the coffee table. The transfers from Arthur's accounts, my house, my life insurance. Why, Clara? For our future, Liam, Evelyn purred, stepping closer to him, her voice sickeningly sweet. Don't you want us to have a beautiful future together? With everything we could ever want? By planning to kill me? Liam asked, his voice hollow, empty of hope. Evelyn's shrug was dismissive, as if they were discussing the weather. She reached into her elegant purse, her movements unhurried, chillingly calm. Well, I was going to wait longer this time. I truly was. You're different, Liam. I really do care about you, more than the others. Her words were a twisted parody of affection, a final, cruel manipulation. Eleanor felt a surge of pure, unadulterated terror. This woman was utterly without conscience, a black hole of empathy. Liam was in immediate, grave danger. She instinctively reached for her phone, fumbling to dial 911. Just as her finger hovered over the screen, the front door burst open. A man in a pristine paramedic's uniform stood in the doorway, a sterile white syringe held conspicuously in his hand. His eyes, cold in focus, locked onto Eleanor. Clara, we need to go now, he said, his voice urgent but controlled. Eleanor's blood ran cold. It was the man Nora had mentioned, the accomplice, the one who had helped Evelyn, the one who had made the initial call to Eleanor, setting up this entire elaborate trap. She was trapped. Liam was trapped. Evelyn turned to the paramedic, a tight conspiratorial smile playing on her lips. Peter, perfect timing as always. She then turned back to Liam and Eleanor, her voice calm, almost clinical, as if explaining a medical procedure. Our little plan was for a double overdose. Mother and son, so tragic, so sudden, just before the wedding. The immense stress, you see. Who would question a paramedic responding to an emergency call for wedding day jitters? Eleanor's mind reeled, the chilling plausibility of it hitting her with sickening force. The fake call to the dry cleaner, Liam's seemingly innocuous request, her confrontation, it had all been a meticulous setup, every piece falling perfectly into Evelyn's diabolical puzzle. Peter, the paramedic, stepped further into the living room, blocking the only exit. Eleanor Vance made a call earlier this morning claiming to expose an imaginary scandal, he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, like he was reciting a script. She sounded unhinged, rambling about bigamy and murder. We were dispatched to check on her mental state, fearing a breakdown. He looked at Liam with a feigned expression of concern. Poor Liam, trying to stop his mother from ruining his wedding. The stress became too much for both of them. A tragic murder-suicide. Eleanor felt a scream building in her throat, choked by terror. They were going to frame her for killing her own son, then herself. The narrative was meticulously crafted, designed to be completely believable. A mother's desperate attempt to stop a wedding, spiraling into a tragic, violent end. Evelyn walked towards Peter, her movements graceful, terrifyingly composed. The syringe contains a perfectly calibrated mixture of fentanyl and ketamine, she explained, her voice almost conversational. Swift, peaceful, untraceable if administered correctly. It will look like Eleanor, in her deranged state, gave it to Liam, then herself. She gestured with a perfectly manicured hand towards Eleanor. Such a caring mother, always looking out for her son, even to the bitter end. Eleanor stared at the glistening needle in Peter's hand, her breath catching in her throat. Her eyes darted from Evelyn's serene, murderous face to Liam's utterly shattered expression. He was still in shock, barely comprehending the magnitude of the betrayal, the immediate threat to his life. They were going to die, here, now on his wedding day. And it was all her fault for trying to save him. The realization that they were utterly trapped and that Peter, the paramedic, was a part of Evelyn's elaborate, murderous scheme, consumed Eleanor with a horror beyond anything she had ever known. Every carefully constructed detail, from the convenient timing of Peter's arrival to the pre-planned narrative of her mental breakdown, spoke of a meticulously orchestrated plan, months, if not years, in the making. Liam, still reeling from the shock, found his voice, a desperate tremor running through it. But people know Mom came here. They'll know something's wrong. Peter, syringe still in hand, shook his head with a chilling smile. Not really. We have a few texts from Eleanor sent to relatives, expressing her concerns about the wedding, about her fragile mental state, and how she was feeling overwhelmed by everything. Quite convincing, really. And Eleanor, you even told your friend Martha this morning that you were feeling unwell and might need some rest after all the wedding stress. He glanced at Evelyn, all carefully crafted by Clara, of course. Eleanor's heart plummeted. Evelyn had anticipated everything, every contingency, every potential witness. She was a master manipulator, pulling strings from behind the scenes, ensuring there would be no loose ends. Then Evelyn delivered a final devastating blow, a casual cruelty that ripped through Eleanor's last shred of hope. And as for your little friend, Nora Reed, Evelyn purred, her eyes glittering with cold amusement. She had an unfortunate car accident 3 days ago. A truck veered into her lane on the highway. Such a tragedy. Peter handled it, very discreetly. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea, a sickening lurch in her stomach. Nora, dead. The woman who had risked everything to warn her, to save Liam, was gone. Murdered. Her sacrifice, her courage, might all be in vain. Eleanor was the last person who knew the truth, and they were about to silence her forever. Liam's face was a mask of utter despair. "You killed her too," he whispered, the words laced with profound agony. Evelyn merely checked her watch, her expression impatient. "The guests will start arriving soon. I need to be ready to play the devastated bride. We don't have all day." She nodded to Peter, a silent command for him to proceed. Peter advanced, the syringe held aloft, its needle glinting menacingly in the morning light. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the end. But a primal maternal instinct, fierce and unyielding, surged through her. She would not let them take her son. With a desperate, adrenaline-fueled lunge, Eleanor threw herself towards the coffee table where her phone still lay, precariously close to the edge. Her fingers scrabbled for it, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt Peter's hand grab her arm, but she pulled free, her desperate strength surprising even herself. Her thumb hit the glowing screen, finding the emergency dial. 911, what's your emergency? A calm female voice answered. Help! Eleanor shrieked into the phone, her voice raw with terror. 23 Maple Drive. They're trying to kill us. Evelyn Reed is a murderer. At the sound of Eleanor's desperate cry and the distant voice of the dispatcher, Liam, finally spurred into action by the imminent threat, roared with fury. He tackled Peter, throwing his full weight into the paramedic. The syringe flew from Peter's hand, arcing through the air and landing with a dull thud amidst the scattered wedding gifts on the floor. Liam and Peter grappled, overturning a small table, sending decorative vases crashing to the floor. Eleanor, still clutching the phone, continued to shout, her voice hoarse, pouring out every detail she could. She's Evelyn Reed. She's killed 4 other men. She plans to kill my son, Liam Vance. She's trying to poison us. In the background, faint at first, then growing steadily louder, Eleanor heard the unmistakable wail of sirens. Evelyn, her perfect composure finally cracking, her face contorted in a mask of furious rage, stared at the chaos. 30 years of meticulous planning, a lifetime of calculated deceit, crumbling before her eyes. 30 years of planning and you've ruined everything, she shrieked, her voice shrill with venom. She darted into the kitchen, her movements surprisingly swift, and reappeared moments later, a large, gleaming kitchen knife clutched in her hand. Liam, still wrestling with Peter, saw the knife, his eyes widening in horror. How long have you been doing this? He demanded, his voice trembling. Evelyn laughed, a chilling, triumphant sound even amidst her rage. Since I was 18, darling. Edward Hayes was my first. I was just a kid then. Didn't know what I was doing. Messy, but I learned. I got better. Her eyes were wild now, gleaming with a perverse pride. 12. 12 perfect murders across 15 states. Millions, Liam, millions, all because I learned how to play the grieving widow, the innocent victim. The sirens were deafening now, just outside the house. Peter, disentangling himself from Liam, frantically motioned for Evelyn to escape, his face pale with alarm. Clara, we have to go, now! But Evelyn was frozen, consumed by her furious monologue, her carefully constructed world shattered, her rage blinding her to the danger. She stalked towards Liam, the knife held threateningly. "You were supposed to be so easy, Liam," she spat, her voice thick with disgust. "Lonely, successful, trusting, just like all the others." "How many others were there really?" Eleanor asked, her voice surprisingly steady, despite the terror gripping her heart. She needed to know. The truth, no matter how horrific, had to be uncovered. Evelyn, her eyes burning with an almost insane pride, her lips curving into a grotesque smile, looked directly at Eleanor. 12, she confirmed it defiantly. 12 perfect ones. The blare of sirens intensified, reaching a crescendo just as the front door burst open. Uniformed police officers, guns drawn, flooded the living room, their presence a sudden, overwhelming force against the lingering tension. "Police, drop the weapon!" A commanding voice boomed, directed at Evelyn. Evelyn, still holding the kitchen knife, her eyes wild with fury, hesitated for a split second. Her carefully constructed empire, built on decades of deceit and murder, was crumbling around her. The perfect facade she had maintained for so long shattered completely, revealing the monstrous emptiness beneath. With a snarl of defeat, she let the knife clatter to the hardwood floor, its sharp glint echoing the sudden, shocking silence that fell over the room. Two officers moved swiftly, securing her. "Evelyn Reed, you're under arrest for the murder of Arthur Reed and conspiracy to commit murder, among other charges." The handcuffs clicked, a definitive sound that marked the end of her reign of terror. As they led her away, Evelyn's eyes, cold and venomous, fixed on Eleanor. "You have no idea what you've cost me," she spat, her voice laced with bitter hatred. Eleanor met her gaze, her own eyes filled with a steely resolve that belied her trembling limbs. "Oh, I know exactly what I've cost you," she replied, her voice firm. "I've cost you my son's life." In the chaotic moments that followed, Peter Smith, Evelyn's accomplice, was apprehended trying to slip away through the backyard. His paramedic uniform, the sterile supplies in his bag, and especially the discarded syringe on the living room floor, now became irrefutable evidence, meticulously gathered by the arriving investigators. Eleanor and Liam stood amidst the debris of what was supposed to be his wedding day. Scattered floral arrangements, overturned furniture, broken glass, and the telltale documents of Evelyn's crimes. The room was a wreckage, a physical manifestation of the emotional devastation they had just endured. They were shattered, both physically and emotionally drained, but alive and safe. A female detective, her face kind but serious, introduced herself as Detective Williams. She took their statements, her pen scratching methodically on her notepad. "Mrs. Vance, Liam, what you've brought to light here is immense," she said, her voice grave. "This isn't just a local case. This is a serial murder investigation spanning multiple states. Your bravery, Mrs. Vance, has potentially saved countless lives, not just your son's." Liam, still numb with shock, found a flicker of practical concern. My money, my house, my business shares, all the things she made me sign over, is it all gone?" Detective Williams offered a reassuring smile. "Given the clear evidence of fraud, bigamy, and coercion, Mr. Vance, most, if not all, of your assets should be recoverable. The marriage to Arthur Reed was never dissolved, which makes any subsequent marriage null and void. Any contract signed under duress or through fraudulent means will be invalidated. It will take time, but we'll work with you every step of the way." As the last of the police cars pulled away, taking Evelyn and Peter with them, a profound silence descended upon Liam's house. The sun, now higher in the sky, cast long shadows through the still broken window, illuminating the lingering mess. Liam and Eleanor, exhausted, found themselves sitting on his porch, the cool evening air a balm against their frayed nerves. A comfortable silence settled between them, a quiet intimacy that had been absent for months. Finally, Liam broke it, his voice rough with emotion. "Mom," he began, turning to her, his eyes filled with a raw, vulnerable apology. "I'm so sorry. I was so blind. I accused you of being jealous, of trying to control my life, of not wanting me to be happy. All this time, you were just trying to protect me." He reached out, taking her hand, his grip tight and reassuring. Eleanor squeezed his hand, her eyes welling up with tears, not of sadness, but of overwhelming relief and love. She pulled him into a gentle embrace, holding him close. Liam, my darling boy, you don't need to apologize. I don't need your gratitude. My only concern was to keep you safe. That's what mothers do. It's born of love, not a desire for control. She stroked his hair, feeling the familiar warmth of his presence, alive and real against her. Liam pulled back slightly, looking at her, a puzzled expression on his face. But how, Mom? How did you know? How did you even start to suspect? Eleanor thought of Nora Reed, of her selfless courage, her desperate plea for help, a plea that had ultimately cost her life. She would honor Nora's memory by finding justice for all of Evelyn's victims. But to Liam, she offered a simpler, more profound truth. Sometimes, my love, she said, a soft smile touching her lips. Sometimes mothers just know. The immediate nightmare was over. Liam was safe, and that, Eleanor knew, was more than enough. The road ahead would be long, filled with legal battles and emotional healing, but they would face it together. 6 months had passed since that horrific wedding day, a lifetime etched in the lines around Eleanor's eyes. Today, she sat in a federal courthouse, the solemnity of the proceedings a stark contrast to the chaotic terror of that morning. Her gaze was fixed on the defendant, no longer Clara, but Evelyn Stevens, her true name finally revealed by the meticulous federal investigation. The woman sat impassively, her expression utterly devoid of emotion, even as her fate was sealed. The judge's voice, calm and unyielding, resonated through the courtroom. Evelyn Rachel Lynn Stevens for 12 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, multiple counts of grand theft, fraud, and bigamy. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The gavel struck, a sound of definitive closure that vibrated deep within Eleanor's chest. Beside her, Liam held her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. They had endured this together, sitting through weeks of testimony, reliving the nightmare. The most harrowing part had been the victim impact statements. Eleanor watched, heartbroken, as families from across the country poured out their grief and anger, their lives irrevocably shattered by Evelyn Stevens. Mrs. Chen, Daniel Lee's elderly mother, her voice trembling with raw pain, described how Evelyn had expertly isolated her son, poisoning his mind against his own family, slowly cutting him off from everyone who loved him before his tragic accident. She painted me as a manipulative, greedy mother, Mrs. Chen wept. And my son, my kind, trusting son, believed her. He died alone, thinking his family hated him. Robert Foster's sister, a woman with a face etched with enduring sorrow, recounted how Evelyn had convinced Robert to sever ties with his siblings over fabricated drama, leading him to rewrite his will, leaving everything to his loving new wife, just weeks before his fatal overdose. The patterns were sickeningly identical, each story a mirror reflecting Liam's near fate. Even Peter Smith, Evelyn's paramedic accomplice, had received his due, sentenced to 25 years for his part in the conspiracies. His testimony, given in exchange for a lighter sentence, had filled in many of the missing pieces, detailing Evelyn's cold, calculating methods. When it was Eleanor's turn to speak, she rose, her voice clear and strong, despite the tremor in her hands. She looked directly at Evelyn Stevens, who met her gaze with a chilling blankness. "You weaponized trust," Eleanor stated, her voice resonating with a mother's righteous anger. "You sought out good, trusting men, and you systematically destroyed them, not just for their money, but for the sheer pleasure of it. You left a trail of heartache and devastation, all while hiding behind a mask of charm and vulnerability." Evelyn remained impassive, a stone statue of remorseless evil. Leaving the courthouse, Eleanor and Liam navigated a gauntlet of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. They ignored them all, their focus solely on each other. Once in the car, a profound quiet settled between them. Liam finally spoke, his voice heavy. "It feels empty, Mom. This justice, but it's a step. I know it is." "It's over, sweetheart," Eleanor whispered, squeezing his hand. "That's what matters." In the months since the arrest, Liam had bravely embarked on a journey of healing. He had been seeing a therapist specializing in victims of psychopaths, slowly, painstakingly learning to rebuild his shattered trust, not just in others, but in himself. The realization of how deeply he had been manipulated, how close he had come to utter ruin, had left deep scars, but he was mending. A new ritual had emerged for them. Every few weeks, Eleanor and Liam would visit the quiet cemetery where Nora and Arthur Reed were laid to rest. They would place fresh flowers on Nora's grave, a silent tribute to the brave woman whose anonymous call, whose sacrifice had ultimately saved Liam's life. Eleanor would stand there reflecting on Nora's selfless act, a debt that could never truly be repaid, but could be honored through their own survival and the justice finally served. The federal investigation, spearheaded by Detective Williams, had meticulously unearthed Evelyn's full, horrifying history. Her real name, Rachel Lynn Stevens, had been used in childhood, abandoned along with her difficult foster care upbringing. Over 15 years, across 15 states under a dozen different aliases, she had systematically accumulated over $8 million and, far more chillingly, taken 12 lives. She truly had been a ghost, a shadow moving through society, leaving destruction in her wake. Slowly, Liam's life began to mend. His assets were recovered. His house, his business, his savings. The fraudulent transfers were reversed, the legal nightmare of reclaiming his financial independence, a long but ultimately successful process. More importantly, he was regaining his ability to trust his own judgment, his own intuition, a confidence Evelyn had almost completely eroded. Their Sunday dinner tradition resumed, a comforting anchor in their healing journey. One evening, Liam, a faint smile playing on his lips, announced, "You know, Mom, I might actually try dating again." Eventually, he chuckled, a genuine, joyful sound Eleanor hadn't heard in ages. "But don't worry, there will be background checks, forensic analysis of their social media, and of course, your rigorous approval process." Eleanor laughed, a wave of warmth washing over her. "Only the best for my son," she replied, her eyes brimming with love. She thought back to her own doubts, the agonizing moments when she had questioned her sanity, when Liam had accused her of jealousy. She realized then that protecting a child sometimes meant being willing to be hated, to be misunderstood, to stand alone against the world, if it meant keeping them safe. Liam reached across the table, taking her hand. His eyes, now clear and bright, met hers. "I love you, Mom," he said, his voice filled with gratitude and profound affection. "I love you too, sweetheart," Eleanor replied, her heart swelling with an emotion too vast for words. Liam was reclaiming his life, piece by painstaking piece. And in that, Eleanor recognized the true victory, not just the conviction of a murderer, but the enduring triumph of a mother's unconditional love and unwavering protection.